In the immediate aftermath of Hurricane Helene, Clemson crushed Stanford 40-14 at Memorial Stadium, marking the third straight game scoring 40 or more points.
Pulls it out. On the scramble, Klubnik using his speed again, broke the tackle, directing traffic, touchdown Tigers!
Quarterback Cade Klubnik shone with 5 touchdowns, 4 through the air, while throwing for 255 yards and rushing for another touchdown.
Klubnik taking a shot on the post, got a man wide open, Wesco down to the 10.
Freshman wide receiver Brian Wesco led in receiving with 104 yards and a touchdown.
Daniels flushed out in the end zone, picked off.
Defensively, Clemson excelled with 4 sacks, 3 takeaways, and stifling performances from linebackers Barrett and Sammy. Clemson improved to 3-1 on the season and 2-0 in the ACC. Looking forward to a trip to Tallahassee against 1-4 Florida State.
Proctor under pressure out in the flat. Spiller makes a move, needs to get the first down. There we go! Spiller, 50 yards! Are you kidding me?
Welcome to Season 3, Episode 6 of the Nachos and Analysis College Football Show. I am not Drew Archer, I'm Matthew. Obviously, I'm sure most everybody listening knows about the aftermath of Hurricane Helene, and Drew is currently still without internet, although he does have power, so we're very thankful for that. So I am doing an episode solo this week. Please bear with me. I know Drew has the Ball Talk podcast that he does on his own, but this is my first time doing a podcast by myself, so bear with me. We're going to try and get through it. But we can start off with looking at Week 5 games that happened. First, Virginia Tech and Miami. I believe this was Friday night. Miami ekes that one out 38-34, but very controversial call on a Hail Mary as time expired. Virginia Tech scores a touchdown called on the field and then overturned very controversially. Didn't look like there was enough evidence to overturn it, and that's what the consensus was online. Maybe the ACC has a little bit of money tied up in Miami getting through the season undefeated. Saturday night, at the same time that the Clemson game was going on, Georgia, Alabama. Alabama was dominating early. Georgia ends up coming back and taking the lead with 2 minutes left in the game. Alabama squeezes it out, wins 41-34. Another surprising one, this was in the early window Saturday, Kentucky at Ole Miss. A lot of people had Ole Miss or were very high on Ole Miss early in the season. Kentucky goes in there and gets a win 20-17, upsetting. Crazy to me that, a preseason top 5 SEC team was a little overrated. Who would have thought? Another big game from Saturday, Colorado at UCF. Colorado really looked good. I didn't expect them to have a great game this week against UCF, but made the trip down to Florida, come out with the win 48-21. Travis Hunter should be Heisman frontrunner, honestly. Played like over 100 snaps, had a receiving touchdown and an interception in that game. He's a crazy player. And we'll end off our Week 5 recap with Florida State traveling to SMU. Thought that game might be a little close, but SMU had other plans, and they end up beating down Florida State 42-16. Florida State off to a 1-4 start. Looking pretty rough for them. They kind of look like crap. And if your septic tank also looks like crap, be sure to reach out to our loyal sponsor, Pump Monkey Septic Services. They're owned and operated by Clemson alumni Alan Powell, servicing the upstate. I know Drew has mentioned seeing them all the way out in Simpsonville. They're based in the Clemson area, but will make a trip out anywhere in the upstate area. You can find them on Facebook and Instagram. Give them a call at 864-710-2211. When the dump's funky, call Pump Monkey. All right, let's review this Clemson-Stanford game. Clemson's 26-point win marks the first time winning 3 consecutive games by 24 or more points since 2020. Clemson has scored 40 points in 3 straight games, the first time since the end of the 2020 season. Tigers racked up 165 points over the last 3 games, the most in a 3-game stretch since 2019. Clemson held Stanford scoreless on 3 of 4 red zone possessions, which hasn't been achieved by Clemson since the 2022 ACC championship game. Big key to success, Stanford was moving the ball very well early on, but getting into the red zone, it was bend but don't break defense for Clemson. Clemson forced 3 turnovers on downs, and Stanford was 0 for 3 on 4th down attempts. The Tigers rushed for 150 yards against a Stanford defense that ranked 3rd nationally in rushing yards allowed. I know if you were watching the game early on in the game, Stanford's defense did look like top 3 rush defense, but kind of able to break it open a little bit. Phil Maffa got going in that second half. Clemson averaged 6.64 yards per play, achieving this average for 3 straight games for the first time since 2020. I think we were on over 7 yards a play for the last 2 games, though, so a little bit lower. Offensive efficiency coming down a little bit. But the level of competition was also going up. So Cade Klubnik threw for 255 yards, 4 touchdowns, and rushed for 1, tying his career high for total touchdowns. And Klubnik is the first Clemson quarterback since Trevor Lawrence to throw 3 or more touchdown passes in 3 consecutive games. Very impressive, especially after finishing the 2023 season on 3 straight games without a touchdown pass. Cade Klubnik also surpassed Kyle Parker to take the 9th spot in Clemson history for career touchdown passes. Wide receiver Bryant Wesco recorded 104 yards and became the first freshman to have multiple 100-yard receiving games in his first 4 games. Kind of surprised that Sammy Watkins doesn't have one of those. Clemson recorded 3 interceptions, their first game with 3 interceptions since last November against Georgia Tech. Linebacker Barrett tied his career high with 3.5 tackles for loss and a sack added on top of that. Freshman kicker Nolan Hauser had his first multi-field goal game, now 5 for 5 on field goals this season. What a great start for the freshman. And lastly, Clemson has now scored in 284 consecutive games, extending their streak as one of the longest in FBS history. My thoughts on the game, on the defensive side, you started the game with the first 3 drives, getting 3 turnovers, one of them a turnover on downs on that first drive when they tried to go for it on 4th down in Clemson territory, and then 2 interceptions, I believe, right after that. The first play on both of Clemson's first 2 offensive drives were deep shots, and I think it was really important this game because Clemson kind of realized that when you're not hitting those deep shots all the time, you're going to have to put an offense together and drive the ball down the field. And it took us a couple drives to get there, but I think we ended up finding a good balance with Phil Maffa and the pass, and not just taking deep shots, but hitting mid routes, short routes, making the defense really play it all over the field instead of just trying to cover you over top. But overall, I think it was a great game for the Tigers. Obviously, 40-14 was a big win, and it looked like it was going to be a lot closer in the first half. So happy to see some first half adjustments translate into the second half. And then also, we still have not seen Clemson defense play a full great game. I mean, you only allowed, I think, 7 or 14 points in the first half this week, but you allowed a lot of yards. Stanford was moving the ball very effectively. It was just getting down into the red zone and causing turnovers that kept Clemson way in the lead. So I still don't think we've seen that full, complete game from the Tigers defense yet. This might have been the closest we've seen to a complete game from the offense, though. So looking for the defense to continue improving this week against Florida State. And we'll probably get to that in just a minute. So unfortunately, with Drew not having any internet, there was no Twitter poll posted this week. So we will skip that section and just go straight into Fact or Fiction.
Fact or Fiction.
Fact or Fiction. DJ Uiagalelei is scared to play Clemson. I didn't write this one. Drew actually did get a chance to help out with the notes for the episode this week. So he is here in spirit. But I don't know that DJ is scared to play Clemson. Maybe with how their season has gone so far, he is, because it would be very embarrassing for him to go into Florida State, expect to be, they were a top 10 preseason team, and now 1-4, unranked, probably not going to make a bowl game at this rate. The DJU career is going to need to be studied. There should be a 30 for 30 on this at some point. Fact or fiction, Peter Woods is the straw that stirs the shake for Clemson's defense, and he put in parentheses that the absence has been felt, which I would agree with. I think Stanford ran the ball super effectively on Clemson in the first half, and not having Peter Woods in there has been felt. Clemson's defense, although, is very deep at Peter Woods' position, interior defensive line, so we have been able to make up for it and not falter too much, but it's hard when your best player is missing. Like, you can still play great, but it's a way different team. And I actually wrote this last fact or fiction, but fact or fiction, it was insensitive and irresponsible for Clemson to hold the game on Saturday. From what I've seen on like discourse online, there's like two schools of thought here. One side saying like holding this game took up a lot of resources. You know, you had all your first responders, police, EMTs, all on campus for a football game when they could have been out helping members of the community who were affected by Hurricane Helene. Very valid. Can't argue with that. There's also the other school of thought is when you have a community that is so closely associated with the university and you're going through such a traumatic time, a lot of people in the community having their homes flooded, power out, no hot water. It's just been really tough, I believe, for the community as a whole. And I've seen a lot of responses from locals of Clemson who were very happy that the game happened because it gave them just a couple hours of a break where they didn't have to think about the horrible situation that their lives were in. And I think football does have that powerful ability to bring a community out of a terrible tragedy. And obviously it could have been worse in Clemson. Like Boone is a lot worse than how Clemson got, and Asheville, just two really close towns to Clemson that it could have been a lot worse. So I'm going fiction. It was not insensitive and irresponsible, although it is hard to argue with when you have 100,000 people coming into a tiny town that already is struggling for resources, getting all the ice, taking up all the gas. That probably wasn't the best move. Maybe they could have canceled it, and if you were an out-of-towner, your tickets are refunded and free tickets to members of the community. It could have been handled a little bit better, but I'm still happy the game went on. I'm sure most of the members of the community are happy that the game went on. Would some of these people in the community have power now if the game didn't happen? Possibly, yeah. But I'm sure that 4 to 5 hour break, or even just people who came and tailgated just to get out of their bad situation and forget about it for a day, I'm sure that was very healthy and good for them. So I can see both sides, and I wish Drew was on here so we could get a little bit more of a local perspective, because unfortunately I moved out of Clemson about 5 or 6 months ago. So it's an interesting conversation to have, at least. So let us know what you think in the comments.
Weekly picks.
Moving on to the Pick'em contest last week, me and Drew had so weeks. I did miss on my first underdog pick of the year. Kind of sad. I was 4-0 on underdogs, 3 out of 4 winning outright. Kind of missed this week, but I did hit on favorite. I picked Oklahoma to beat Auburn. It looked a little rough early on, and I thought that it was not going to happen. It was looking like it was going to be a bad week for me, but Oklahoma ends up coming back and pulling that one out in Auburn. I missed on my underdog, like I mentioned. I'd had Washington on Friday night versus Rutgers. Rutgers looking like a different team this year, kind of surprising. So shout out to the Scarlet Knights. And my over, I also hit on. I had Louisville at Notre Dame. That was plus 47.5, and that one did hit also. And a game I wasn't really expecting, but as the game got closer after I made this pick, I kind of started regretting it because I just could see a blowout brewing in either direction. But I had UGA versus Alabama on the under 48.5, and that one almost hit 80 or 90. So I finished the week with 2 points, bringing my season total up to 12. Drew's favorite hit, he had BYU -3 versus Baylor. I believe they won by a touchdown or more. He also had Michigan State covering the spread against Ohio State. They were a 25-point underdog and lost by more than 25. That one misses. Drew also had that same over that I did, the Louisville at Notre Dame, which hits. And then his under also did not hit, which is Oklahoma versus Auburn, under 45.5. Drew also gets 2 points this week and brings his season total up to 11. I just have a 1-point lead heading into week 6. And speaking of week 6, Drew already has his picks in the sheet, so I'm just going to read them off for him because we don't know that he'd be able to record like how I did when I missed a week, and I can just insert his picks. So I'll just be reading them off for you guys this week. But starting off with my favorite for week 6, going with Pitt at UNC. Pitt is a 3-point favorite right now on the road in Chapel Hill. UNC looking pretty bad this year. I think the first 4 weeks they started 3 different quarterbacks. Lost to Duke last week, I believe, and just not looking like a year for the Tar Heels. So going there. Drew, favorite-wise, and sorry, I am unveiling them for the first time right now, has Alabama beating Vanderbilt. And Alabama right now is favored by 23 points. That one will be interesting. Alabama, huge week, obviously, last week. Vanderbilt, I think, is a little better than people give them credit for, so that will be interesting to see how that one plays out. Moving to my underdog, I've got Virginia Tech going on the road to Stanford, that Stanford team that just had a heartbreaking loss to Clemson. Virginia Tech favored by 8 points. I think Stanford's going to cover. Stanford looked really good. They looked really good against Syracuse. Virginia Tech did have a really good showing this week against Miami. Heartbreaking loss for them and kind of stolen away from them. So I'm not sure how they're going to respond to that. Drew, underdog this week, is Texas A&M versus Missouri. Missouri is a +2 underdog to Texas A&M. I really like this pick. I thought about it too. Texas A&M had a tough game this past week, and Missouri looking pretty good also. I don't know how good Texas A&M is, so I like that pick there for Drew. Staying home this week in the ACC for my over. Clemson at Florida State right now is the over underline is 47.5. I think Clemson's offense is getting after it. No matter how many points Florida State scores, I think Clemson scores 48 on their own. Drew also picking an ACC matchup. SMU versus Louisville, that over-under is set at 57.5. Both of those offenses do like to score, so I could see that happening. It's not a bad pick there. My under pick for week 6. I'm just a big ACC fan. Every game I picked this week was in the ACC. This one under Wake Forest at NC State. Over-under is set at 55.5 right now. I don't know how good either of those teams are. I don't think either of them are good is the thing, so could be interesting. Hopefully not a lot of points go down in that one. And Drew's under. I will say this is the second time Drew has picked a Minnesota game, and he spelled Minnesota wrong both times. I'll let it slide, though. He's got USC versus Minnesota over-under set at 51.5 right now. Will be interesting to see. I'm not sure how either of those teams really are other than USC, and they're decent. But that leads us into the Clemson-Florida State game. Clemson trails the series against Florida State all-time 15-21. Clemson trails the series on the road in Tallahassee 6-12. And the last meeting between these two teams was September 23rd in 2023. Clemson lost 31-24, which puts Florida State on a 1-game win streak. Right now, as of recording, Clemson's favored by 16, or it might have changed. I don't know where Drew got these notes from. I think it might be like 14.5 right now. Was the last thing I saw on ESPN. There's a note here. I'm not sure. I know it's still up in the air, and he's listed as co-starter now. That DJ Uyunglele out for multiple weeks with a finger injury. And I believe this relates back to the fact or fiction from earlier of that he's just scared to play Clemson. Could definitely see that. It would be kind of embarrassing for him to show up this week, I believe, because I don't think it's going to be a close game. Dabo Swinney will attempt to make conference history and pass college football icon Bobby Bowden in career win totals. And not only that, but the game to take the record is against Florida State, Bobby Bowden's former team, and on Bobby Bowden Field, I believe, is what Florida State has named their field. Clemson is attempting to win a 4th consecutive game at Doak Campbell Stadium for the first time in series history, really cutting into that 6-12 on the road matchup, or record, that Clemson has all time in Tallahassee. Clemson's October 5th true road opener at Florida State represents Clemson's latest road opener since October 9th, 2008, when Clemson's 12-7 loss at Wake Forest led to Clemson elevating Dabo Swinney to interim head coach the following week. That's kind of a convoluted stat there, very specific. And Clemson has not lost to a team with a losing record at the time of the game since losing to 2-5 Boston College in 2010. I've already mentioned it a couple times this episode, but Florida State is 1-4 so far on the year, only win coming against Cal last week, I believe. Clemson has not surrendered a point in the first quarter this entire season, attempting to hold opponents scoreless in the first quarter of each of the first 5 games of a season for the first time in Dabo Swinney's tenure. Clemson is currently outscoring opponents 73-0 in the first quarter, which is really impressive, especially considering we had the game against Georgia to open the season. That's included in that, because I feel like a lot of our, good offensive stats so far will say, in the last 4 games or the last 3 games. Technically, all of those are the same if you include the Georgia game in there, because we didn't score a touchdown. But I kind of already mentioned this episode. I'm looking forward to Clemson going down to Tallahassee this week. Florida State hasn't looked this bad in a long time. Clemson hasn't looked this good in a long time. So I don't think it's going to be a very close game. I expect Clemson's offense to roll well over Florida State. Florida State has some kind of bug going on in their program. Everybody thought they were going to be really good this year. Maybe they just didn't work for it. Live by the portal, die by the portal, and they are dying by the portal this year. I apologize for the short episode. Everybody, all your thoughts and good vibes to the people of the upstate and, even outside, all the people affected by Hurricane Helene. Hopefully everything can, get recovered soon. And it's crazy that we're over a week almost from the impact and still feeling the repercussions of it. So thoughts go to especially like Boone, North Carolina, Asheville, North Carolina, and just the members of the community of Clemson. Hopefully nobody had any hard feelings about the game being held on Saturday. I think most of those hard feelings are coming from people outside of the community who don't necessarily get the impact that Clemson football has on the community. One other thing I didn't mention in the fact or fiction, though, is like most of the local businesses in Clemson rely on game days to make it throughout the year. And missing one of those game days is a huge impact on those local businesses. Very touchy situation, but I appreciate you bearing with me for this episode. Sorry again. Hopefully Drew will be back and ready to go next week, and we will recap this Florida State game and preview Clemson's trip to Winston-Salem to take on Wake Forest. Thank you again for bearing with me. I appreciate you all. See you next week as we talk some ball. Peace.